Here's a quick demo of an agentized local small language model AI system. So using Microsoft Autogen Studio, I've asked it to create a Python script that shows how kilowatts can be used to calculate carbon footprints. And so what we see is a user proxy sent the system message, and then Chad, our designer, said you should have a title bar and form elements and a calculate button, and when the results are displayed, do this, and etc. and so forth. Everett, our coder, then wrote some Python in Kinter for a GUI. And so you can see that here he's outputted code to make this calculation that was defined above by Chad. Let's take a look and see what he came up with. So you see, enter your electricity usage per day in kilowatts. My house does about 11 kilowatts. Carbon footprint, 5.06 metric tons of CO2 per day. Well, that's super interesting. Okay, so, and then they go on to work back and forth. So you can see the user proxy has tested this code and said that it executed successfully. Chad then proceeds to say, okay, now let's design a UI for the calculator. And it goes back and forth. And then Everett says, well, you know, the detailed UI is not something that I necessarily do, but gives some feedback. And the user proxy goes back and forth. And then Chad says, here's a concept for a carbon footprint calculator. And ultimately, they produce some HTML with some JavaScript to complete the UI, but the user proxy doesn't know HTML and can't test this. All right, seems like a lot, right? But let me show you how this is possible. So first things first, we have some different models. So I have Llama 2 as an inference model locally running on my machine for strategy. And then I have 3 different coding models that can write different versions of code. And so in the case of this one, we've identified that Everett is our coder, and Everett is using Magic Coder 7 billion parameter. So we've given him a system message that says he's a software developer AI. He can write files to disk, execute code on the computer, etc. and so forth. And so Everett is the one that is writing the Python code. Chad is a designer, and so he describes experiences that Everett is meant to create. He never writes code, and he is using Llama 2 because he is not a coder, he is strategic, and so his temperature is also turned up to make him more creative. And then finally, the user proxy is using Code Llama. And so the reason that user proxy is using Code Llama is because Code Llama can execute functions. And so he can save Python scripts to disk. This is really important. So when one of these workflows gets created, design and code, what you'll see is that we're having Chad start, then Everett write code, then the user proxy tests the code, and then it goes back to a design manager until it has been solved. And then finally, when we go into the playground and we run that, that's what we saw previously. And so you can see in the console, if you look at it, you'll see that it started with Code Llama, and then it moved to Llama for strategic input. So remember, it started with our user proxy, and then it went to Chad for the strategic input. And then it went to Everett using Magic Coder, and then back to Llama, etc. and so forth. And so these agents are working together to solve problems. Pretty cool.